In this video I'm going to show you how to use the Destrukt Photoshop Action. So here I have my stock photo, and I'll put a link to this video, to this photo down in the description. So if you want to follow along with this tutorial with this photo, just download that and yeah, follow along. So what we're going to be doing is essentially blowing off the roof of this house with this action. So the way the action works is that you choose from 5 different directions: left, right, up, down, and middle. You firstly brush over your photo where you want to blow apart, and you play the action and it creates all these effects for us. So I'll just click through a few more examples that I have. So there's the right direction. That's another up direction. So you can see that you can actually turn off. I keep everything layered with my actions, so you can just turn things off if you don't want them. So in this example, I've just turned off all those broken pieces, so it's just more of a cloudy effect. Alright, I'll close these down and start from the beginning. Alright, so firstly we need to make sure that your Photoshop file is set up correctly so you don't run into any errors and you're going to achieve the optimal results. So firstly, look into the layer panel here. Make sure your photo layer looks identical to this. So it must say background and have that lock symbol. If it doesn't, so I'll just demonstrate this. So if you open up your photo and it doesn't say background and have a lock symbol, go to Layer, New, Background from Layer, and it sets it as a background. So you only need to do that step if it doesn't look identical to that. Alright, so still in the Layer panel, go to the top right hand corner icon, go to Panel Options. Right down the bottom here, make sure Add Copy to Copied Layers and Groups is ticked. Click OK. Next, go to Image Mode, make sure you're in RGB color mode and 8 bits of channel is selected. Go to image size and just make sure you're using a large resolution photo. I recommend a range of 2000 to 4000 pixels for this action. It's just going to create a lot more detail in the effects if you're using a high resolution photo, so steer clear of using photos under 1000 pixels. The action will still work, but you won't get that real detailed look in the effects. And use a pixel per inch range of resolution of anywhere between 150 to 350. That will help achieve even better results. So you can see I've set mine to 250 here. So yeah, adjust that if it's very low. Okay, so that's that. Now what we need to do is create a new layer. So go Layer, New Layer, and you must call this layer Brush, B-R-U-S-H. It must be all lowercase, otherwise the action won't work. So what we need to do now, with the brush layer selected, we just brush over our photo where we want to explode or create all the effects. So I'm just going to hit B on the keyboard and get the brush tool out. I'm using the square brackets there to adjust my brush size. See that? I'm just going to pick red, doesn't matter what color, and I'm just going to start brushing over my photo here, all the parts that I want to blow up. You can use a soft or a hard brush, it doesn't really matter. Just avoid brushing very small areas, and with a thin brush. So don't go over your photo and brush little lines like this. It's best to brush a large area of photo, and you can always sort of hide or erase some of the effects after the action's finished. So I'm just going to brush a little bit more along here, just randomly. Okay, so that's now all ready to go. Okay, so what we're going to do now is load up the Actions panel. So I go to Window, Actions, it'll pop up here. Click on this icon, go to Load Actions, select Destrukt.atn. Here it is, pops up in here. twirl this open, and there's your directions. Excuse me. So all we need to do from here is select one of these directions and click play on the action. The action will take around 2 to 3 minutes to play back. So just click play and then come back to Photoshop in a few minutes time. If you want to check the progress of the action, how long it's got to go, just twirl open the action here, and when it's playing back you'll see the scroll bar to the right. It will be going down like this. So when it gets to the bottom there, it's finished. So keep that in mind. And before you run the action, it's a good idea to always go to edit, purge, and all. That'll just clear out any history that's banked up, and which can actually sometimes cause issues with actions. So just make sure that you purge your history before running the action. Okay, so I'm going to pick the up direction now. I'm going to just twirl this open so I can see the progress, but it's going to click play. And like I said, the action is going to take a few minutes to play back. That'll depend on sort of the specs of your computer as well, and how large your photo is. So I'll just fast forward the video now and get to the result and talk about what each layer does. Alright, the action's finished and you can see it has created all the effects for us. So what we'll do now, we'll just close up this, close up the actions panel, and look inside the layer panel here. So firstly, what you want to do is collapse all these folders. So a quick way to do that is just with the folder that's already selected, Destrukt, hold down Control Alt or Command Option on a Mac and click on that arrow. And that will just collapse all the folders. Alright, so I'll go from the top down, talking about what each layer does and how it affects the design. So this top one I've just called Reveal Original Photo, and I've got in brackets Brush Mask. So what this layer does, if you select the layer mask, and if you grab a white brush, just make white your active color, hit B, you can actually brush away the effects entirely. So if I start brushing, you can see that it disappears. So you can really fine tune the appearance. So for example, say I don't want these parts down the bottom left hand corner, I can just use this mask here and brush them away. You can use a softer brush. So at the moment it's at 100% opacity. I can turn that down to 50% or maybe lower, like 20%, and just brush away just little sections. You can focus on the edges. So use this layer to fine tune. If you're using this action on people and there's broken up parts that have appeared over the person's face, you can use this layer mask here just to quickly erase it. Okay, and if you want to bring it back, grab a black brush. I'll hit X to make that the active color, and just start brushing back in on the mask. You can see out there. Okay, what I might do, I might actually just fill that whole mask in black just to bring it back to the original state. Alright, so going on down, so these three layers in here, I've just labelled them all with purple, and these are just ones to affect just like the brightness and contrast and colour saturation of the effects. So for example, if you double click on this one, overall saturation, you can use this saturation handle here to increase the saturation of the colours. You can remove it, so you have it black and white. So you can play around with that handle there. Alright, so by default I've just turned it up a little bit. Overall brightness, if you double click on this one, you play around with these handles here, you can adjust essentially like the contrast of all the effects, just like that. So by default, without that, that's what it looks like, and I've just made sure that when the action's finished, that it's turned up the contrast a bit to enhance all the details. So you can go in and play around with these handles. Okay, I've also got this one here called Overall Contrast, and I've got in brackets opacity. So this is just another way to affect the contrast of the effects. So if you move your mouse over the word opacity here, click and drag to the right, that'll increase the contrast 100%, 0, and I drag it to the left. So start off at 0 and slowly start dragging to the right, and it will slowly start increasing the contrast of all the effects. So you might find that, you know, it looks really good with your photo with the contrast all the way up. So just by default it's at 0, so just keep that in mind. Soft cloud swirls. Now what you'll notice with the colouring of these layers, the way I've done it is I've grouped these 3 in yellow. So they're the ones that you want to experiment with, you know, by just turning it on and off, the layer on and off, just to see how it affects the design. Okay, they're quite similar, these 3 layers. So you will find, you you might use a photo and these bottom 2 don't suit it, so you just turn them off. Okay, so just remember that those 3 there in yellow, you want to experiment with, just quickly turn them on and off. And also check the opacity in the blend mode as well. So if I look up here, this one's set to overlay. It's got opacity of 100, so you can easily just adjust the opacity of these layers. You can set the blend mode to soft light, so it's not as intense. You can go down and check other ones. This one's probably a bit too intense. Vivid light. All depends on your photo, really. Okay, so that's that one. Add soft glows. Inside this folder here, they're all turned off, but if you turn them on, they just add soft, subtle glows over the highlights of all the effects. So the area is basically in white. It'll just add just a little bit of glow. It just helps to add just a little bit more atmosphere, but it might not suit your photo. That's why by default I've turned it off, all these layers. So you could go in and just turn them on one by one and see how it looks. Cloud set 1. So if you look at this folder here and then right down at the bottom we've got cloud set 2, so they're quite identical, they're just different positions up the layer order. Okay, so we're going to select cloud set 1 here, so you can turn them both off to see how that's affecting the design, just like that. If you want to make it more prominent, you can also hit Control J or Command J, duplicate the layer, so then the effects start stacking on top of each other. So it makes it that then when I just duplicate it, just give it a lot more density to the effects, much more intense. So what I find the best way to experiment with all these layers and to quickly experiment with how they affect your design is to simply just go down and turn them on and off. Okay, turn the folder on and off, see how it affects things. You never know, because I do that every time when I'm using this action, and you'd be surprised that, you know, sometimes you might have a whole chunk of these folders turned off and it looks a lot better. Okay, so yeah, that's those 2 layers. There's a little layer style set to this layer here, outer glow. If you double click on this, adjust this opacity handle here of color burn, and that will actually increase, well, you can see what it's doing there. So that's one to play around with as well. That can sort of up the intensity of all the effects. Okay, close that. Now these 3 folders in blue are essentially all the broken up fragments you can see there. So if you turn these all off, all you're left with is smoke, essentially, or clouds. So that's an effect you can opt to use as well. We don't have to use the fragments. Okay, this one down the bottom here, dust particles. If you look, if I just zoom in a bit here, if you see around the edges, or you can see over the entire design, those tiny little particles, that's this folder here, dust particles. See that? So if you want a lot more, just duplicate the folder over and over and over and move those layers around. If I go inside here, there's the dust layer there. You can move that around so you can see that there. So you can create a ton of those little dots if you want. I'm just going to zoom out. Oops. Zoom in a bit. Okay. I'll turn these 2 back on. Now fragment set 1. Actually, I'll turn these 2 off. Let's go one by one here. Fragment set 1. If you go inside here, so these are all the broken up parts, all on separate layers. So you've got complete control over the positioning of them. You can duplicate them, rotate them. You can do some strange things like add, I could double click on this layer and go color overlay. Whoops, wrong one. Color overlay, and you can start, color picking different colors around the design. I don't know, just experiment with. That's how you can experiment with sort of adjusting the appearance of each one of those fragments. Another little trick here, if you I think this is for CS6 and above. If you double click on this folder, you can actually apply a layer style to all the layers within that folder. So if I go like, drop shadow, you'll see it's added a drop shadow to all those fragments. So I mean, you can go like pattern overlay, and I've got a rock texture here. I can scale that right down. I could set that to like overlay, like that. So each one of those fragments now actually has a texture on top of it, which is pretty cool. Bevel and emboss to give it a bit of depth. You can play around with those settings. So just remember that option's there, but I'm pretty sure it's for CS6 and above. Now another thing to keep in mind with this layer, with this folder, is the mask, the way I've set up this mask. So I'm just going to hit Alt or Option on the Mac and click on it and go inside. Okay, there it is. So everywhere in white is where I've restricted these fragments to appear. Everywhere in black they won't appear. So I'll head back on out here. So if I want to duplicate one of these layers, I'll duplicate it there. And if I start moving it around, you'll notice that it's pretty much restricted to that main center area through the middle here. Because if I go back into the mask here, that's that big white patch. That's essentially the main area it's restricted to. So if you want to remove the restrictions, duplicate that layer, Control J, and move it outside of the folder, like that. So now I can move some of these parts, off to the side here, so it looks like it's blown out a bit more. And all these fragments are different sizes, so just check out duplicating them. So that's quite a small one, so I can move that out to the side. Play around with blurring it a little bit, so I can go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and just adjust these. It just helps with the overall effect, so like the realism of it. So that's that. Okay, so moving on down, and if you want to hide this mask temporarily, just hold down Shift and click on it. So that way you can see when I do that, there's a lot more fragments appearing off to the side here. But just to help with the default look of the effect, I've created that mask to make it appear in only random areas on the outside of that main center area. So fragment set 2, like that. So that appears, these fragments basically stay around the area that you brushed, around there, but they just move out a little bit to the left and right, so you can see that there, but a lot of parts sort of stick to the main area. And fragment set 1 is pretty much just everywhere, so it covers more of this throughout the bulk of the effect there. So they work hand in hand together to build the overall effect. And then dust particles just adds that fine little bit of detail to help with the realism of the effect. Alright, so going down, black smoke, turn this one on and off. So you can see that there, that's basically sits behind all these clouds. The opacity is up pretty high. So if you play the action and you notice that a bulk of all the effects is quite dark, just check this layer here, black smoke, turn it on and off. You might prefer it with it off, might look cool with it on. Other things to play around with, you can move it up the layer stack. I'll move it up there. So you can see it's sort of cut off, it's hidden most of those fragments in the darker area. So now it's created a pretty cool effect there. Or you can move it up above and adjust the opacity. If I just hit 5 on the keyboard, it'll adjust the opacity of that layer to 50%. That looks pretty cool. Did it look better than how it was down here? Probably not, so I'm going to turn this back up to about 90%. And don't forget to play around with the opacity of these folders, the fragments. So I'll just select it, I'll hit 5 on the keyboard again, and I've just adjusted all those fragments to 50%. Play around with the blend mode as well, the folder. Get some cool results that way as well. Okay, so yeah, I've briefly talked about this layer here. This one, add cloud contrast. That sort of just boosts the density of all the effects. So you've got to turn that on and off. So again, the opacity of this one's quite low. Always when you're like clicking through these layers, just check the opacity, and then so it's at 40. So I'm just going to crank this up to 100. What's it look like? Looks pretty cool, but don't want it at 100%, I think. So I'm just going to move that down a bit. That'll do. Soft photo backing. By default, this is on, so might not show up too well in this photo. Oh, it does a little bit. So if you turn both of these off, around the area that you brush, you will essentially lose all the definition of the original photo. But if I turn these both on, you see how a lot more of the detail just came back in. So if you're thinking that you've just played the action and you've lost a lot of detail of the original photo, or you want to bring it back, turn these two on and you'll start to see it come through all the